Well, we had a little bit of a change in our program if you've been kind of following us. Unfortunately, Bradley Perry from the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation was not able to meet us. They had some operational changes. However, we are excited to welcome actually our board chair, Linda Christopher, is going to kind of guide us and talk to us over about 10 minutes. Not really the history of zero waste, but just how it's evolved over time. Please welcome Linda.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and happy Earth Day again. And welcome to all our Zoom viewers. We know that you're here. We are celebrating that this is the 56th anniversary of the first Earth Day, but there's also another notable event that happened in April, almost 30 years ago, and that is a group of recycling, reuse, and compost advocates came together to meet at a YMCA camp in Rock Eagle, Georgia. And yes, I was there. So yeah, we slept on the bunk beds, the thin mattresses, and ate in the cafeteria. But it was all good because we were there to harness the excitement and the expansion of recycling in the 90s. And we wanted to create a vision where it was beyond collection and beyond bottles and cans, and turn it into a force for protecting our environment, conserving resources, and creating a sustainable society where we can meet our needs without robbing the future of a planet. And that vision was zero waste. That organization was the GrassRoots Recycling Network, GRN, if you know that. And that organization is still in existence today. And now it's called Zero Waste USA. So here we all are. What's important is that we had a lot of pushback immediately afterwards, and you might still find that. People are saying, well, is zero waste practical or attainable? And people were saying, no, it's too visionary, it would take too many resources, you can't have 100% recycling. And I understand about entropy, but the fallacy of that thinking is that they're putting zero waste in a lens of integrated waste management. Now, there are some terrific integrated waste management programs, but it's a fundamentally different thing. We measure success in looking at materials, diverting from landfills, and measuring our progress in tons. But zero waste is a fundamentally different thing. So what we're doing is that we're looking upstream and we're redesigning entire systems of extraction, processing, manufacturing, and distribution to reduce waste every step of the way. And we're not trying to just capture it at the end, because we know in zero waste that municipal solid waste is actually dwarfed by mining and industrial waste. A lot of the damage to the environment has already occurred before you even throw something in the landfill. So what we do with zero waste, again, we go upstream and we look at conservation and try to prevent waste. And how we look at it differently, for example, is that if you're in the business, in the old days, you'd go out on the loading dock and you look and you say, hey, what do we have here? Okay, we have some cardboard, we can divert that, or maybe here's something we can eliminate and reduce. And you're doing a lot of good things. But primarily this was handled by the recycling coordinator, the sustainability department, and janitors. Zero waste says, oh, no, we go back to the very beginning. We look at what we purchase, we look at what flows through our business, and everyone looks at reducing waste. And that's the engineers, the designers, R&D, the managers, the frontline workers, people in distribution. You look at every step of the process to eliminate waste. I'd like to read something, take a second here, because I have a quote from Henry Ford. And he said, recycling is what you do when you have failed to design out the waste. He regarded salvage as a secondary and inferior activity to his primary goal of no waste efficiency. So he called it no waste. He didn't call it zero waste. And he said that waste was a failure of management. One way that we can try to get our heads around zero waste and how we're going to achieve it in the future is that we're not just looking at material. We're looking at the form and the function and trying to conserve the value of the things that we use in our life. So I'll give you a really easy, intuitive example. So let's say you have 2 glass bottles, and I take one of them and I crush it in the recycling, and I take the other one and I reuse it and refill it. Okay, well, we all know that that's better. We know that we reduce, reuse, and recycle, but often in recycling, we just look at tons of materials in glass. And it's not just the energy inputs to make that bottle, it's the huge furnace, as huge as an industrial warehouse, that has to be created to make that bottle. There's all the people and the engineers and the quality control and the factory workers, the cars that they drive in to get to the factory. Once you crush that bottle, all of those inputs have been wasted and destroyed. You can only conserve value by keeping that form and their function. And we can even go beyond that. Sometimes the form and function and the value of what we use, you can't see. So it's on the molecular level. So here's just a random example. If you go to the grocery store and you look at the produce that's wrapped in plastic film, you may not realize it, but every single one of those bags is different because each one of them is designed on the molecular level to protect that particular type of vegetable or fruit. So what that means in particular is that they just have different permeabilities for water vapor and for gases like CO2, oxygen, and ethylene. And we just think of it all as plastic film. Let's collect it, mush it together, make some really crummy product like a plastic pallet that may not even meet the specs of the people that want to buy that packaging. And we're not looking at the actual value of what's embedded in that item. And that's the zero waste approach. There was something else I wanted to say, but I might have to just move on because there was something there. Another way that we can look at the value is, let's take another example, and that's organics. Often we just turn to composting. Composting is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's vitally necessary. Steve Sherman, who is a compost consultant, is passionate about this. He says that once you take those soil components, you mix it with other materials, it goes in the landfill, and it's gone forever. And we don't have that to feed our soils, feed ourselves, and sustain us. But even more so than composting, obviously you want to reduce organic waste, but a higher value or a hierarchy, as Celeste talked about earlier, is reducing waste. Then we want to feed people first before we compost. And then we want to feed animals. So you can collect food that's no longer good for people and you can use it for cattle silage. This is done sometimes at produce markets, grocery stores, food banks that have expired canned food. And then there's industrial applications, and then there's composting. Sometimes with industrial applications, people just think of anaerobic digestion, but there's many more opportunities. We can take organic discards and we can use them to make organic chemicals used in industry. I worked with a company once in my recycling economic development days, and they took chicken feathers from poultry processing plants. They isolated the proteins and they sold that as feedstock to the pharmaceutical, cosmeceutical, and cosmetics industries, because they were looking at the value of what that material had to offer on the molecular level. And they were saving that value, and they were creating economic activity at no cost to taxpayers, no cost to ratepayers, and we helped them get equity investment. It was such a valuable project. And this creates jobs that are not just on the sorting line. So you're looking at quality control, administration, shipping, distribution, and sales, and scientists. This is really the way to extract the value from our waste stream and create jobs. Went on a tour of another company. They were in a community that had disposal prices, and they needed to find something to do with all the waste from their fishing industry. Well, this company took a lot of the fish waste and they processed it in like these commercial kettles that are used in food production. And they made a liquid organic fertilizer that they sold to organic farms. And you might think it's a pretty gross operation, but it was actually really clean and it smelled good. It smelled like cioppino or bouillabaisse. And they created a lot of wealth for their community. And in the same community, a different business took the crab shells. They also isolated the proteins. They made contact lenses, and they also made sutures for, medical and surgery. These are really high value products that meet very high specifications and standards. And think about, okay, I can't hold my hands together here, but think about how much value is in a handful of contact lenses, perhaps hundreds of dollars. If you were to sell compost, I know you sell by the yard, but it's probably about $100, $120 a ton. But this could be hundreds or thousands of dollars of value that you hold in your hand. And we're now able to provide for our needs, to have a good life, and using wasted resources to create community wealth. You're going to have a lot of speakers over the next 2 days. So I'd like you to look for these concepts of looking at form, function, and value, and not just downstream collection, recycling, measuring success in tons, and the type of material. If you have any doubts, we do have many, many examples and proven paths in industry. Industry has zero waste goals too. Zero emissions, zero harm, zero injuries. Zero incidents is a term in the insurance industry and in the International Standards Organization, ISO 9000, they have zero defects. Here's some 3 common traits before I close. The first one, that can zero defects. You don't just inspect products at the end of the line, but you work all the way through the system, going upstream to eliminate defects. And everyone in the organization is involved, not just inspectors. We also have total quality management and continuous improvement. So that's something that's also a common thread, is that what Toyota says is we do what we do today just a little bit better than we did yesterday. Everyone is involved and everyone is making small changes. What they try to do is that they say, we are committed to reducing our waste, not recycling as much as possible. So enjoy the 2 days. I hope that you're inspired and that we are all going to work upstream and change the mindset for zero waste.